everybody, and welcome to The View from the Top. We have got an amazing show for you today. I know there's been so much interest out there in this subject. I think we're going to have a bumper audience. If you're out there in LinkedIn world, on Facebook, on YouTube, then let us know. Tell us who you are, where you are. I think you all know the way it works. Join in the conversation. If you hear something you like, hit the like button, hit the heart button. If somebody comes on stage you want to talk to, hit the applause button. Say where you are in the world. Say, so we've got Emily there. We've got Sheryl. Sheryl's in our green room. Great to see you, Sheryl. Glad you're there waiting for us. My good friend Michael Cadden used to work together at the FEM from Connecticut. Elisa, people are coming in from all over the world. We're getting really big numbers today, and it's just such a big subject. If you've missed it, why is it such a big subject? Well, the answer is we're talking about DE&I, okay, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, we have talked about DE&I before. We did a show about 6 weeks ago with the amazing Jasmine Williams from Rock Central, and she was the director of DEI and telling us what was going on in their organization, all the amazing stuff they do. But this time we're doing something different. I don't think it's ever been done before. We're going to be talking about specifically DE&I as it relates to mobility. I call that mobility diversity. I mean, that is a big subject. And I'm delighted to say we've got the most amazing panel today. And I am actually truly honored by the panel we've got. We've got Sheryll Young and Michelle Williams, who are both joining us from Canada. Sheryl's with PwC, Michelle is with Walmart. We've got Kristin Faison from Zendesk. And we've also got Ursula, Dyer, Lepporoli, all the way from Sydney in Australia in lockdown and in the middle of the night. So we'll find out more about that when we meet our guests. But what a panel we've got. It's going to be absolutely amazing. And not only do we get to talk about this really important subject, but even better, you get credits for it. Yep, we are approved for GMS credits, CRP credits, HRCI credits, and SHRM credits. And towards the end of the show, we're going to be releasing those credits. So if you want your credits, hang around. You'll get them at the end of the show. And as Sanjog says, it's a great topic for discussion. It really is. Hi, Sheryll and Michelle. Hello from New Jersey. Hi to you, Devika. Hello from Arpuva in London, from New Jersey. People are coming in from all over the world. This is so exciting. So what a exciting time we've got for you today. Now, the other thing I should say is that this is actually our last show until September. We're taking August off. The View from the Top is having a vacation. How about that? We're having a vacation. We were chatting in the green room earlier, and I asked the others where they were going on vacation or whether they were actually having a vacation. I mean, obviously it's the show that's having the vacation, and we're going to be back September 1st. Sadly, I think I'm the only one actually physically going on vacation, and everybody, no doubt they'll tell you about it as they come on. So let's move on to the show. Let's start the show. And as ever, we're going to start with immigration with the wonderful and newly back in the UK, Julia Onslow-Cole. So let's bring Julia Onslow-Cole onto stage. You know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the applause button, hit the like button, and let's give Julia, for the last time until the break, a really big View from the Top welcome as she comes on stage. Let's bring Julia on.
Brian.
Where are you?
I'm actually back in Winchester now, so that's good. Yeah,
Okay.
I came in on Sunday, and I've had a visit from Track and Trace and a phone call every day so far. So all the systems seem to be working very well in the UK.
Okay, so you're housebound at the moment, so you can't escape.
In quarantine, yeah.
Okay, and if you get a call whilst we're on air, you've got to answer it and tell them that you're in the house, or else you get fined. Is that how it works?
Well, I think if you, I was telling you quickly before we went on air that I heard of someone who was in her house upstairs, and they rang, and she had a phone call saying, "Where's your husband?" And she said he's in the house, but actually he was walking the dog. And what she didn't realize is that they're doing physical visits. So the actual lady was standing on her front doorstep, and the husband came up behind her with the dog, and he got a £10,000 fine, and she got a £2,000 fine. So when the lady came and knocked on our door, I made sure that we rushed to the door, showed ourselves. Yeah.
Okay, you don't want to mess with the authorities, especially in your role, of course, Julia. Exactly. So anyway, what are you going to talk to us about today? I think you said I'm
going to talk to you about the US. Yes, trying to go to the US, and I think that was something that was raised last week. So I was just going to pick up that and think it would be a good place to end, because there's so many people desperate to get to the US.
Okay, so tell us a bit about it.
So first of all, I just wanted to give a really big thank you to Charlotte Slocum. She's the partner who heads our consular practice. She's based in London, and she certainly isn't having any holiday. She and her team are working absolutely flat out. There's so many business people that want to get to the US. So a quick reminder, you'll remember that President Trump introduced a US travel ban. And then when President Biden came, he actually relaxed the ban that was for L's and H's, the work authorization, but he actually increased the travel ban, which was in place for health and safety reasons. So now there's a travel ban from anyone coming from the Schengen, UK, Ireland, Brazil, Iran, China, and then President Biden added to that list by putting South Africa and India on the list. Now, Angela Merkel went over to the US for her last visit last week, and she begged President Biden to actually take the Schengen off the list and look at the list. And there was a lot of rumors to think that the list might change, but in fact, the White House said no, it was going to stay. They're worried about the Delta variant. And I think probably the best guess is that it's going to change in September. So until then, you need a waiver to get into the US if you're coming from one of those countries. And that is unless you're a green card holder, you're married to a US citizen, or you're a student. And there's been loads of anger in the business community to say, well, why are students exempted and not business people? And the important thing to remember is you need this waiver, even if it was a US, even if you're on an ESTA. So I'm just looking at Davika's comments saying it's been a nightmare. Yes, unless they receive an NIE waiver, absolutely. So even if you're on an ESTA and you don't need a visa, you still need the waiver. So you need a waiver if you're an ESTA person, or your visa, or you're applying for a visa. Now, what you could do, you think, is you could go and hang out for 14 days in another country that's not on the list. And so lots of people are going to Mexico, but that only works if you don't need a visa to get to the US. So if you're an ESTA holder, you could do that. You could go to Mexico, but you couldn't do that if you needed a visa, because all of the consulates around the world are only dealing with applications from people who are resident in that country, and they check up. So, if you're in Mexico, they'll only let you process the visa if you have residency in Mexico. And the difficulty is that there's skeletal staff all across these embassies. Just to give you an example, I got some figures for you for London. So in London, there were 17,500 applications made for these waivers last month. There's a backlog of US passport holders of 25,000. They're receiving 1,000 emails a day, and each week they're helping 1,000 executives. So it's really, really busy. And since they're funded high fees that they get for these applications, and there's a worry about lack of travel, there's a sort of ongoing concern about staffing levels. So if you're in London and today you just wanted an ordinary visa appointment, the first available is May 2022. So that's how backlogged they are. So you can apply for a waiver if you're offering vital support or executive direction to critical infrastructure or significant economic business. And these two layers are really important. They're executive direction or vital support, because there was a time where senior people found it more difficult to get to the US than junior people because they didn't have this executive direction. So this is really important. Now, one thing that's hugely important, that if you remember nothing else of what I say, this is really important. On the 6th of July, you can now get a waiver, which is valid for 1 year. And before, it was only valid for 30 days. But the fact that you can get it for a year means that you can do some strategic planning now. And so you really should think about your top executives, who needs to travel in the next year. And if you can get one of these categories, then it's really, really worth planning and really thinking ahead. And the final thing is, if you have someone with a really, really pressing humanitarian need, then we have been very fortunate in getting those applications through very, very quickly. In fact, we did one very recently for a poor child. He had leukemia and his mum was with him in the US, and the grandma wanted to go and relieve her for support. And we got that in 2 hours. And you can actually get that done at the border as well. So just remember that it is quite possible for humanitarian reasons to really exceptionally get something very fast. But otherwise, try and think strategically.
Okay, so it's clearly a very difficult time actually getting those appointments and getting the processing through. And I noticed in the comments people were saying there's a lot of shock about your May 2022 date, but yeah, that's how it is. Okay, Julia, thank you so much.
Yeah, lovely.
I hope you enjoy how long have you got to stay in your house for now until you're allowed out?
Saturday, free on Saturday.
Okay, well, all the best. Have a nice walk on Saturday where you can go and walk outside your front door. Anyway, let's say goodbye for the summer. Sounds like the start of the song. And we'll say goodbye to Julia, and we're going to bring on the one only Pat Jurgens. So everybody, you know how it worked. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say goodbye and thank you to Julia Onslow-Cole for all the work she's done in this series of The View from the Top. She will be back in September. And let's bring on Pat Jurgens. So let's welcome him in time-honoured fashion. Good to see you. Are you in the holiday mood?
Say again?
Are you in the holiday mood?
Oh, you betcha. I think I mentioned during our pre-show that my staycation starts tonight and my grandson's coming in. So we'll be spending time with him over the next week. That'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay. So before we get too sort of holiday focused, tell us what is Expat Pat going to be talking about today?
I have two topics I wanted to cover with the audience today. First one is on Russia, the tax developments in Russia. And if you remember, 2021 started with a tax increase in Russia. They traditionally have had a 13% flat tax rate. They put in a new higher tax rate at 15% for incomes over 5 million rubles. But in context, it's still a very low tax country by comparison to other locations. But now the key focus is compliance by the tax authorities. And one of the things that they have drawn attention to is so-called digital wallets. And if you think of that in a different term, cryptocurrency, they're looking for taxpayers to declare their transactions using cryptocurrency. And the threshold's relatively low. If you do transactions of over 600,000 rubles, then you need to report it. And starting in October of this year, failure to report your crypto transactions will trigger potential penalties of 20 to 40%, depending on the severity of the transaction value. So it's not on any potential tax that's triggered by the transaction, it's the value of the transaction. So that could be quite onerous for people who love to play in the crypto world. The other focus, and this is being reported by KPMG Russia, they're reporting increased audit activity of Russian taxpayers, and their focus is on foreign assets, foreign offshore companies, and foreign bank accounts. And this is all thanks to information that the Federal Tax Service in Russia has obtained through information exchanges with foreign tax jurisdictions. And these are known as Tax Information Exchange Agreements, TIEAs. And this is a way for tax authorities to talk to one another about activities in their jurisdiction for account holders in the other jurisdiction. So, they're going after this information. And, what's interesting is that they've just gotten this information for tax years 2017 through 2019, and they've already started the audits. They're sending out document information requests to the taxpayers, and they're looking for when people are not declaring income and not paying Russian tax on these offshore accounts. Does this sound familiar to you at all, Brian? Does this sound like other jurisdictions that have done this? Notably, the United States, they use the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, or FATCA, to go after information, and they have the ability to compel foreign banks to report on foreign accounts of U.S. taxpayers. So,
what sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander.
Yes, exactly. So, interesting. It's in the context of Russia, known for hacking, known for ransomware attacks. Well, good for the gander, good for the goose, I suppose. The other information I wanted to cover is tax developments in in Australia.
Yeah.
The tax year in Australia just started this month of July. One small change that's happened is that the superannuation contribution rate for employers has increased from 9.5% to 10%. Doesn't sound like much, but this is the Australian primary pension scheme, superannuation. And according to our guest Ursula, some local employees who are on a salary packaging scheme, they'll actually see a small decrease in their net pay because the company is only committing to total compensation, which includes the contributions to superannuation. So the cash element will go down a little bit. So, something that many of the taxpayers may not be too happy about. And the Australian Tax Office, ATO, also looking at cryptocurrency. They've issued guidance. Their message is that they're able to get the data on transactions in these crypto exchanges, and they'll be looking for taxpayers to declare capital gains and losses related to these cryptocurrency transactions. And finally, probably one that's going to be more interesting in the global mobility space, there is a proposed new objective test for determining whether individuals are tax resident in Australia. If enacted, it would probably come into effect as of July 2022. So we still got a bit of time.
It's some sort of statutory residence test.
Yes. And so, it matters because if you're a tax resident, you're taxed on worldwide income, whereas if you're non-resident, you're only taxed on Australian sourced income. And with a top tax rate of 47%, it will make a difference. So, historically, tests for residency, it's more been on the concept of domicile for most long-term residents. And that's in the context of where's your usual place of abode, where are your family members located, and the like. And so generally speaking, once you have domicile in Australia, it's hard to break it unless you are establishing a domicile somewhere else. So what they're proposing is that there'll be a bright line test. This first part of it, it's a 2-part test, is easy enough to understand. If you are in Australia during the tax year for more than 183 days, then you are a tax resident, easy enough. But then you fall into the second test, secondary tests. And those are intended to cover an analysis of looking at the pattern of presence over a longer period of time. So presence in Australia for 45 days or more in a tax year will be looked at, and other factors such as whether you have the ability to reside in Australia permanently, you have the right to reside there, where is your close family located, are they in Australia, and do you have available accommodation, and do you have economic interests in Australia? So those secondary tests, if passed in its current form, will be much more challenging to manage for unintended tax consequences. So something to keep in mind.
That's really helpful, Pat. And actually, seeing as we've got Ursula in our green room too, we might even pick up on that, some of those Australian tax issues there as well. But Pat, have a great vacation, or stay put. Enjoy your time with your grandchild.
Yes, thank you.
And see you again. Have a great August. See you in September. So everybody, you know how it works. A big thank you to Pat. Hit the buttons, hit the heart, hit the likes, hit the applause. Get those buttons going. And we're now going to move on to our special topic of the day. And I can't emphasize enough how important this is. And we've got such an amazing panel. So without further ado, we're going to say goodbye to Pat, and I'm going to bring on our amazing panel. This panel is just awesome. I'm so excited that you're all here. And I tell you, the audience has gone well. I don't know if you guys are seeing it on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is just going ballistic with hearts and applauses and what have you. Yeah, let's give it back to them out there. This is just amazing. Now, big thanks to all of you for being on the show, but I'm going to pick somebody out, okay? Big thank to you, Ursula. It must be stupid o'clock for you. What time is it where you are?
It's 1:24 a.m.
And we've only just started. Okay. So are you sober?
Yes, I actually had a pre-nap, so I'm good.
Okay. So you got the kids to bed, had a little schluff, and then you've woken up for the show.
That's right. I've had 4 hours of sleep, so I'm good to go.
Oh, look at this from Jamar. We hit the jackpot today with our guest speakers. We certainly did. It's an amazing panel. And as I said, it's just so wonderful to have you all here. But a lot of people know you, and there's a lot of love out there. But let's just, for those that don't, let's just go around and introduce yourselves and maybe tell us a bit about your career, your personal career journeys. Sheryll, do you want to kick off?
Sure, why not? Hi, everyone. Sheryll Young. I identify as a Black female. I'm an immigrant from Jamaica, and I've called Canada home for the past 20 years. And I've been in the GM industry for, I think, about 11 years now. I started off as a GM administrator with an insightful conversation from a mentor. And I had a number of roles on the industry side. And now I am back at PwC in the GMS practice on the service partner side.
Okay, and Michelle, do you want to tell us? Fab 4-in-1 frame, says Bindu. Michelle, tell us about yourself.
Sure, no problem. Well, similar to Sheryll, I am born and raised Torontonian. I'm a city girl and then moved out to the small town of Milton, which is not so small anymore. I fell into mobility probably about 12 years ago and fell in love with it, navigated my way throughout RMCs and then into the corporate world where I am right now with Walmart Canada for about 2 years. Happy to be here and happy to be managing this program.
Okay, well, I think most people will have heard of Walmart, so that's great. Zendesk, Kristin, tell us a bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Happy to be here. So Kristin Faison, I am from the Washington, D.C. area, specifically in Hanover, Maryland, born and raised in the DMV, as we call it. I've been in the mobility space now for almost 11 years. I also fell into the space from an immigration lens. I was working actually in support of USCIS as a government contractor, and then shifted gears a bit and really took a deep dive from a corporate standpoint, joining a mobility team, worked across several different industries, whether it be tech, financial services, food and beverage, and now my latest venture, I joined Zendesk earlier this year in January. Happy to be here.
Okay, and for people that don't know Zendesk, what does Zendesk do?
Yeah, so we're a customer service platform that we offer to our consumers, and we are the champions of customer service. We put customers first and believe that their experience should be the top notch. Okay, and Ursula, tell us a bit about yourself. I'm not hearing an Australian accent though, even though
No, Brian, when you asked me to kind of tell a little about myself, I was like, is it okay if I tell a little bit of life journey? So hello, everyone. I know that Sheryll's going to talk a little bit about what underrepresentation means, but I wanted to let you all know that I'm joining from lockdown. I'm here in Sydney, which is actually the Aboriginal lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I want to acknowledge their leaders past, present, and emerging. So in Australia, we're a lot of migrants, and I'm a migrant myself. So I came out to study and do a postgraduate degree, and then I decided to stay. So I went from being a minority in the US to a super minority here in Sydney, where you don't often meet too many other African-American dual citizens. So I've been at KPMG for 16 years now, always working in the expat space. I'm probably not the typical image that someone conjures up in their mind when they envision a KPMG tax director, but here I am nonetheless.
What do they conjure up when they
Probably someone that looks a bit like you, Brian.
I'm not touching that one.
White male. The phrase I heard was pale, male, and stale.
Oh boy.
Deeply. Anyway, it's all good. In all seriousness, though, actually, I do think that for a conversation like this, in many ways, I'm not the right person to facilitate that, and I acknowledge that. So Sheryll has very kindly offered to co-host today. So I'm going to hand over the baton to Sheryll, and if you want to sort of, I'm passing it over. This is like in the Olympics. Okay, they're doing the relay race. I'm passing that baton over to you. Don't drop it. Over to you.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Ursula. It called to mind that we do need to do a land acknowledgement as well. So just to start off, I'm in the city of Mississauga here in Toronto, Canada. And I'd also like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather, which the region of Peel operates. As part of the treaty lands and territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land and continue to do so today. In particular, I acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and the Ojibwe and Chippewa peoples, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I am grateful to have this opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give my respect to its first inhabitants. So I guess to level set the conversation, when we talk about underrepresentation in general, and I'm trying to be as informal as I can make this because I recognize that this topic shows up differently for everyone. But I want us to keep, I guess, top of mind that when there is a dominant race in any one place, group, setting, culture, socio-construct, that is generally the evidence that some form of racial exclusion exists. So today we're speaking specifically about individuals who identify as a Black woman or are viewed as Black females by their colleagues. Now, generally, categories of ethnicities are determined by census data, and people do self-elect the ethnic origin that they feel they identify with most of all. Now, admittedly, there are nuances to the regional and or global distinctions around data collection, self-identification, and trust that I know we can unpack in the next 40 minutes or so, but it certainly bears weight to the discussion on inclusion overall. I was in a session once and a gentleman had said, diversity is a fact, inclusion is a choice. So I guess for avoidance of doubt, before we go to each of the ladies, this conversation isn't about making decisions based on race. It is about keeping inclusion as a focal point of your strategy from attraction to retention that takes issues like this into account at all levels of the organization. And I, for one, am truly glad that I got to meet Ursula, Kristin, chat with Michelle again about what I think is a really timely topic. So I'm going to get started and I'll probably just pick on you, Ursula. You talked a bit about your background, but share for the audience a bit more about what it was like for you becoming a female leader of color. And if you're a bit more open to it, what were some of the barriers that you had faced?
Sure. So I think anyone who's, is seen as, different or has been in a situation where they're the only one in the room will know what it's like to feel different. And so choosing to study in Australia and then becoming a citizen, it's my choice. I choose to be here. I can proudly say I've never actually experienced any kind of overt racism being here, but I know that I'm lucky. I don't experience it too at work either, but I know that I'm lucky. I'm really familiar with intersectionality, and I think you're going to talk a little bit about that later, Sheryll, because oftentimes, probably 99.9% of the time, I'm the only Black person in the room. I'm the only Black woman in the room, and probably on the floor at work. So I remember a time in a book club. I lead a team and we have a book club, and we were having a conversation, a casual one. And I asked my colleague, do you ever feel like you're representing your whole race when you're conducting business or, living your life? And they looked at me very perplexed and really couldn't, resonate with that perspective. But, oftentimes I'm the only Black person that someone in my team knows. And it's hard not to feel that that's an opportunity to show them that, as being that real life Black person that they know, that we're capable of doing anything that they are. Because blending into the crowd's not really an option for me. I'm always going to be sticking out. And that's kind of, as I was saying, being, the super minority, I've turned it into my superpower. And so I've found places to thrive where, that strength of sticking out is not something that's seen as a bad thing, but where I can actually show and stand up for what I feel is important. So I know we talk often about mentors and having things like that. So my performance partner actually sits in another city. So I've had to, be very forthright in developing relationships with people internally and externally to grow professionally, which I think is good for anyone. Having an outside vibe is really good. So I've got my sights set on partnership, and I'm hoping that I get there despite this thing we call COVID. And
hundreds of votes out there. I tell you, if we all have a vote, if that audience out there has a vote, we do. Come on, KPMG, let's have a campaign. Come on, KPMG, we can do it.
Before I get myself in trouble, I just wanted to mention that in the 16 years that I've been working in this space in Sydney, I've never had a tax briefing for another Black female, which is a crazy thing to consider, given who wouldn't want to come to Australia and live the Australian dream. So maybe you can give me a heart or something if that just sounds like craziness to you.
The hearts are going mad out there, going mad. I don't know whether we're going to come onto it now or later, Sheryll, but I know we've got a heading here about underrepresentation, not just in mobility, but on assignments as well. And that, I think, is what you're talking about, is that you've never done a tax briefing for another black woman coming on assignment, which is just shameful. We'll come back to that in a minute. Yeah.
How about you, Kristin?
Yeah, so I mean, I think very similar to what Ursula has described. You know, when I look back on my career, and honestly, even a lot of my life, often seeing that and realizing that I am the only one. If I'm being, completely honest, when I think back to middle school, at the time I was actually living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I realized in that moment that I was different. I was literally the only person that was not white attending my school, and I in that moment, said, oh wow, okay, yeah, I do look different than everyone else. But I think, to a certain extent, my parents had really instilled in me that you work hard and you do what you need to do to exceed, and it really shouldn't matter, even though I found that it does, what you look like, right? Mm-hmm. When I think of the workplace, again, when I look at when I've looked at leaders that are above me, quite often not seeing individuals that look like me, and so having to resonate with that and figure out, okay, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my career if I don't see others that look like me that are leading various aspects of the business, or leading certain portions of HR? Is there a path for me? And I am very grateful for the mentorships that I have found, be that whether it be in work or outside of work, that really have helped to ground me and to remind me that you are worthy, you put the work in, and there is a path forward in some way, shape, or form. You may have to be strategic in movement with respect to taking on different responsibilities, or making sure that you're seen, making sure that you're networking, which I'll be honest is still somewhat challenging to me, the networking aspect and talking with people that I don't know, and trying to find that commonality. But yeah, I mean, I think, in a general sense, I'm grateful for where I am and how far I've come, but very apparent even, to this day that I am one of the few. So
yeah, thanks for that. How about you, Michelle, Toronto girl?
Yeah, I think the similarities resonate, and I would say there's tons of synergies there, right? Going back to falling in love with mobility 12 years ago, I can distinctly remember going to some networking events and just looking across the room and not seeing a face that looked similar to mine. I mean, it wasn't until maybe 2015 when you and I met, Sheryll, and we actually created a connection between the two of us. And you've done right? You've done a great job representing Black Canadian women in this profession. But again, it just shows that there are a lot of gaps in this industry from the representation perspective, and we have an opportunity to bridge those gaps. So, I'm looking forward to the start of this hopefully being the catalyst for that.
Perfect. So thank you each for sharing that. And I just want to tie up what you each said, because it really aligns with some of the stats that we're seeing. And it just goes to the Black female experience. And I'll share the top 10 with you. So Black women are less likely to get the support and access they need to advance. They are less likely to interact with senior leaders. They face more day-to-day discrimination at work. They experience a wider range of microaggressions. They want to lead and are motivated to improve their workplaces, are unfortunately unfairly penalized for being ambitious, and are less likely to see leaders of their own race in the workplace, are significantly underrepresented in leadership roles, and are much less likely to be promoted to manager, and the representation dwindles from there. So I want to look outward a bit, because in a combination of data points from 2019 to date, and certainly this did not go into the racial distinction, but when we talk about women overall, organizations with about 5,000 employees indicated that females represented 27% of the gender profile that's on assignment. and females account for less than 50% of transferees in most organizations. And even though the number of females that are on assignment remain largely unchanged, there is the evidence that women want to go on assignment and they want the mobility experience, but that's just not happening. And I know Pat called it out, and I did actually had a chance to read it. It was the ARINC DEI Pulse survey, really insightful. And when companies were asked what areas of DEI they're currently focusing on for their GM program, 53% of respondents stated gender diversity first, followed by 46% on cultural diversity, and then 35% on racial diversity. So I'll probably chat with you, Kristin, first, because I know you're new to Zendesk and you had mentioned your roles prior. What are you thinking in terms of strategy? You know, at the GM practitioner level, what does that need to look like when we're talking about diversity and inclusion at the GM level?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, you know, from a GM perspective, what I have seen is that, you know, traditionally we serve as the facilitators of an assignment. Like we don't traditionally have a say or a voice or an opinion with respect to who is selected to go on an international assignment. It's truly the business says, hey, this is, you know, who we're sending and this is where they need to go, and let us know how long it's going to take to, you know, make this happen. And so, you know, I really think that on the one hand, it is having discussions like this and, you know, highlighting that there is this disparity that exists to the appropriate stakeholders in, you know, your organization. But I think ultimately it really, to an extent, pares down to the hiring practices of the organization, because if the hiring practices of the organization do not showcase that of, you know, ensuring that you're attempting to acquire diverse talent, then the pool in which, you know, the organization is looking to select from their current employees to send on assignment, you're not going to then see a diverse, a representation of diverse employees. And so I really think this is, you know, a partnership that perhaps, you know, Global Mobility can have with your you know, your talent and organization development team, with your recruiting team, in, you know, figuring out how to or what are your organizations doing with respect to being intentional on hiring diverse talent. I know at Zendesk we have partnerships with HBCUs as far as recruiting is concerned. There is work that's done to ensure that there's diverse representation at the final round of interviews, and ensuring that the interview panels themselves are diverse. Right. But then also, I think once you get someone in the door, you have to retain them, and they have to, you know, be able to believe that they are welcome and that they are you know, see that path to advancement and things of that. So, you know, whether that's the creation of employee resources groups that have, you know, some sort of tie to executive sponsorship, ensuring that there is leadership programs that are created. I know, you know, again, at Zendesk, we have this program called Ignite, which I'm actually a part of, and it is genuinely intended for individuals that are from underrepresented, excuse me, parts of the business, and, you know, serving as mentors. And it's a 6-month journey that we're going on. So I think from that aspect, that's conversations that need to be had, and maybe applying some of those same hiring practices to the selection of candidates for, you know, who is being sent on assignment. But then I think there also is a different component of what we can change and potentially have insight into, which is, again, making sure that individuals who are selected to go on assignment that are diverse or of diverse backgrounds, that they are set up for success for their assignment. So, you know, when it comes to cultural awareness, ensuring that that is not just a blanket cultural awareness program, making it unique to that individual and that in their the individual's family, to let them know what they can expect to experience when they go to this new country. You know, what is it like to be a Black person in India, or what is it like to be a Black person in Australia? And making sure that, you know, they're set up for success in that stance. And I apologize, the last comment that I'll make is just education. I think quite frequently employees don't even know that international assignments are an option or what it could do for your career. So from a mobility standpoint, just making sure that you're being an advocate for your program and making sure that that awareness is there.
Thanks so much for that. How about you, Michelle? What does that look like for you at Walmart?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. But I just wanted to take 2 seconds to step back and say those stats that you mentioned, the first 4, 5, 6 bullet points, we could just say check, check, check to a barrier checklist. That would be all of the points right there, right? Yeah. And then some impactful stats about, just reporting. And I think that's where we really have to go down to. We have to drill down to the foundation. And it really does start with the reporting and providing impactful reporting to leadership that's going to frame our strategies for our programs moving forward. From a domestic perspective, I've asked our RMC to look for ways that we can respectfully track that data. And as well as I know our global US team is already putting their finger into the pulse of how do we track that diversity and inclusion on our assignments. But when I think specifically about that, I just think it just needs to, if we've got the reporting in front of us, that creates the framework, which then leads us to unlimited possibilities from a diversity perspective, inclusion, equity, all of that good stuff.
Ursula, what does it look like on your side? And I suspect it's a bit different being on the client service side, but I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, look, and I think Jacqueline has asked, is D&I more than about women and skin color? And it definitely is. So in response to your stats there, I'm not surprised that 53% of organizations are focused on women right now. It certainly reflects what I'm seeing here in Australia and in KPMG. So there's increased focus on women on boards and in the C-suite, because in Australia, we have dreadfully low rates of women in both spaces. And so if you looked at the number of non-Anglo people in power, your eyes would probably water. So with so much room for improvement, it's no wonder that, adding cultural diversity in positions of leadership has really only recently catapulted to the fore. It's great to see more businesses taking on interest in diversity, whether that's, I know KPMG in Australia has got a very keen view on LGBTQI issues. We've got, a view on disability as well. But I think in this particular panel where we're talking, we have a particular view on being a Black woman. So I think that's why we focused the chat on that today.
Yeah, I'd like to come in on that because we did a separate session on D&I more generally 6 weeks ago. And, and this is one issue. You can look at D&I through so many different lenses, so many different prisms.
Absolutely.
But today, the prism we want to look at it through is this particular prism. So I appreciate that, we're not disregarding the other ways of looking at D&I.
Not at all. Not at all.
Looking about the role the experiences of Black people, in particular Black women in mobility. And one of the things I'll put my hands up for, we run the top 100. And when I looked at who was on the top 100, it was not a very diverse list. Now, that's not down to us, that's the vote of the population. But that was one of the things that got me thinking about why. Why is it like that? And what are the drivers for change? There's one question I just want to come back to. I think it was Michael Hughes raised a question. And here we are, Michael's with ARPIN. He raised it to Kristin, but I'll just throw it out more widely. Do you find the tech world to be more inclusive, priority skills rather than existing relationships to have access to opportunity? Are there some sectors that are more welcoming, more open, more inclusive than others? And I suppose that also raises a question about, how do corporates compare to suppliers? So I'd be interested in people's views on that, to Michael's question.
Did you want to take that one, Ursula? I've got views on definitely what we're seeing in the tech space, but I'd love to hear your comments first.
No worries. So I think at KP in Australia, we've announced some targets for diversity for the first time in the partnership. And so we're on the cusp of actually counting people. So I think that a lot of companies might have these aspirations to address diversity, but until you actually start counting people, you can't have an intelligent conversation about it until you have some numbers. Otherwise, we're just kind of talking in circles. So I think it's great that we're embarking on that journey. And I think you're absolutely correct, Brian, that I don't think people have actually thought about diversity in mobility yet. I think we're very at the infancy of that journey. But me, myself, I worked on our KPMG expat tax program. And early in my career, I actually did the tax returns for the gentleman who's actually our current CEO, who was just named that person. And so in my mind, I think, how many C-suite executives do we see who've had expat experiences? And if we really want to diversify who we're seeing inside of those roles, then we've got to do what Kristin's saying. We've got to look at our hiring practices, and we've got to look at who we're actually putting into these roles, these expat assignments, if we want to see more brown and Black people in those expat roles and in that C-suite space. Maybe you can hit the light bulb in the chat there if you think that that's a good idea.
Yeah, you heard it there. Hit the light bulb if you think it's a good idea. Let us know your feedback. What are people thinking? Okay, back to you, Sheryll.
Thanks. No, that's a great. Did you want to do a poll, Brian, so we can break it up a bit? I'm fine if you wanted to move into one or talk about some of the stats that came through leading up to this. I found them very insightful.
Okay, we've got a couple of polls. So I'll start. This one is, we asked the audience, this was through LinkedIn, do you think global mobility is diverse and inclusive? And in particular, we asked people to specify whether it was diverse and inclusive as regards the mobility function itself, or regarding the expats on assignment, were they a diverse and inclusive group, or indeed both? And one point actually that I think it was Jasmine, our guest from Rock Central a few weeks ago, made, is that nobody is diverse. You know, by definition, everybody is one person. The only way you get to diversity is by looking at the people in the room. And the way she put it, which I thought was rather nice, is diversity is the people who's in the room. And then inclusion is whether the people in the room are all speaking or which of them are speaking. But to the question of diversity, what we gave people 4 options, which was basically, yes, mobility and the expat populations are both diverse. Only mobility is diverse, the assignee population isn't. Only assignees are diverse, the mobility population is, and then neither are sufficiently diverse. And this was the result. Basically, the conclusion was, to put it as simple as, nearly 70%, 69%, said neither global mobility itself nor the assignees on population were sufficiently diverse. So I don't if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, that 17% threw me off for a bit because I'm sensitive to where my experience sits. I don't see that diversity. Similar to your experiences, I think through even working on the corporate side, I can think of maybe 5 females in my entire time that I've supported for an assignment. Certainly starting out in the former years of my role, and then it wasn't a significant number. And then women of color, I can't think that was a very large number. So I'm surprising to see that 17%. But for what it's worth, to your exact points, and I think Jacqueline had said it best even on the comment section, it's not just about one color, nor is it about race, but the issue I think that we're all speaking about in the same way is where each organization is at seems to be at the male-female construct, and diversity is certainly much larger than that. So we need to be looking at ways to develop programs and conversations around hiring practices that get us out of just that male-female construct, because even that in itself is not an inclusive term, and that requires a whole different conversation. But I'm conscious of time, and I've not done this before, so I don't want to go too far into your time frame, Brian. So
yeah, there was another poll that we did actually, and I think this one, I found the results a bit surprising. My organization is actively focused on building a diverse and inclusive expat population. Okay. And what we found from LinkedIn users was 38% strongly agreed and 32% agreed. And so, in other words, only, 18% disagreed and another 11%. So what's that? 29%. One way or another disagreed. But my experience, and tell me what your guys' experience is that most programs there doesn't seem to be a particular focus on building a diverse and inclusive expat population, which about the assignees themselves. But tell me, you're closer to it than I am. What do you feel?
I'd love to delve deeper into those numbers, for lack of a better phrase. But so here's the thing, and I think most organizations will probably say to you, I can hang my hat on a hat that our population's diverse. So for what it's worth, you can't necessarily argue the conversation around diversity by that you've got more than one demographic in your organization. The larger question is, are you making each and every one of those demographics that exist inclusive? And I think those are two very distinct conversations to have, even though they're tied together. I think we talked about that, but I don't know about you, Kristin or Michelle, if you wanted to take it. What are you seeing in terms of those stats?
Yeah, I mean, I was very taken back by those stats, if I'm being, honest. In my current role, in my current company, we do not really have international assignments. So my experience stems from previous organizations that I've worked for. And I know that really didn't start becoming a conversation until last year, until 2020. And even before 2020, I think as far as the tracking and those numbers are concerned, and what Ursula mentioned wasn't something that was even consistently being done. So very taken back by it, but I also can recognize that the lens of what someone's answer may have been is perhaps different than mine. And diversity, again, as we've talked about, it's not just skin color. It's, it also is gender and, and other things. And so, perhaps that plays into that a bit.
Okay, I'm going to do something I've never done before. This topic is so important. We're meant to finish at the top of the hour. I'm going to let it run on for another 10 minutes, okay, because this topic is so important. Hopefully the audience is going to stay with us. If you've got to go, you've got meetings. I appreciate that people have meetings and what have you. You can get it on record, you can get it on catch up. But also what I want to do is, Sheryll, for our last 10 minutes, I want to move the conversation on. We've identified where we are. But, it's going to be a disaster if we're having this conversation again in 10 years' time.
100%.
So let's just talk about, I've called it driving change. Let's just talk about, what are the steps that we can all do to actually get to a better situation?
I'm happy if one of you ladies want to take it, but I've got a strong opinion as to what we should start with.
Why don't you start, Sheryll, and then we can
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh because it's not, but I think that you girls know me enough to know how strongly I feel about this and even some of the things that you have to make light of. But I think one of the things that I'm really struggling with, and I'll be very transparent with you, is that I am struggling with the sense of passive versus this active inclusion. Like, it seems to be the nice thing to have, and there's this virtual signaling or performative efforts that happen either from a personal or professional perspective, and then it just stagnates or it never goes anywhere. So what I think for driving change, we have to become really intentional about what we're trying to do here, which is move that needle. And to not have the conversations about the same thing 10 years ago means we all have to come to the room equally transparent to strip it down to the bare and say, this isn't working. What needs to look differently? So if you take, I think, and you had all talked about education and cultural orientation training, it's how do then you flip that on its head? Because if we're talking about education at its infancy stages for some, then what has been done in the past may not be working as well as we thought. So we need to really revisit that and be consistent in that. Michelle talked about reporting, which I think is another way that we can get, but it has to be attainable. And it has to be something that we are holding ourselves accountable to doing. It's not something that's just a nice to have. I'm not going to trot out those stats about business change. This is understanding that since last year, everyone has had a different experience. And if you're asking individuals to come to the organization showing their whole selves, you're asking a lot of them to be their whole selves and not even to take that into account. That's driving change for me. Ladies?
Yeah, I would agree. I would definitely agree, and 100% wholeheartedly. agree with everything that you just said, but I think also if we're going to look at a broader lens, it goes outside of our profession, right? We also need to be the change we want to see. We have to advocate, and understanding that us as individuals, the advocacy that we put out there is not always going to be something that's going to be welcomed. Not everybody has an open mind about this topic. Right. We have to be able to put on our tough skin and deal with that, not just from a professional perspective, but a personal perspective as well. But we've got to definitely be the change we want to see. It starts with us. It starts with advocating. It starts with having the difficult conversations. Thank you, Brian, for giving us a platform to have this conversation. I think it starts there, definitely. And then the last thing is in driving that change. I did want to also mention that we do want to be those pillars of change. So in partnership with Sheryll Young and Susan Ginsburg, we're starting this wonderful initiative called the Women's Global Workforce Initiative, where we are welcoming all mobility professionals, HR professionals to join us, and let's just have some candid conversation in a safe space that we all can belong.
I want to do that. You got to tell us how we join up for that, Michelle.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, reach out to either one of us, Sheryll, myself, or Susan for more details, but some more details will be coming shortly.
Cool.
Okay, so you heard it here first. So we're creating something. Tell us a bit more about how you could see this working.
Well, I think when we sat down and we thought about and we brainstormed the objective of this initiative, the first thing, and I think what resonated between the three of us, was just wanting to have a safe space and being able to belong and be our authentic selves. It doesn't matter what we look like. It doesn't matter what our backgrounds are, our cultural beliefs, nothing. It just getting into a safe space where we can all just truly belong and be one with each other. I mean, we all are professional women. We are all professionals in the way where we have dual lives. We're professionals at work. We're mothers and wives at home, or spouses at home. Why wouldn't we have a platform where we can elevate that and talk about those nuances, not just from a DE&I perspective, but just inclusively, just being professionals in this industry?
And one of the things too that the three of you talked about is just the power of your network, right? So the fact that we even sometimes have to struggle to see somebody in the room that looks like us, I think it's time for us to really amplify what allyship can look like throughout driving change and in this group. So if we've got networks, and one of the things that we also talked about was when we say intentional change, we want, when you say you want to join this group, what does intentional change mean for you? What do you commit to doing? And that means, bringing someone up who has never had an opportunity like yourself. It's raising the conversation at your workplace. It's talking about these issues from a public advocacy level. If you're on a board, an initiative, or a task force, and you're seeing some of these issues play out, how do you get that to the state of advocacy? That way you're driving change versus just talking about it. And I think the more that you create awareness about the issues that exist across the spectrum of the demographics that we want to talk about here, that's when you're going to see real change. And absolutely, as you said, at Ebola, difficult conversations do need to happen. And that's something that we've not allowed ourselves to do. And I'd hate to see 2020 go by and we not take advantage of the opportunity to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Sheryll, I'm so excited to join this group. And I'm glad to be a part of this conversation. And I want people to have something that they can take away and do. I'm a really action-oriented lady. And reflecting on this conversation that we're having, I think back to my experience as a Black expat in India, which I think Kristin alluded to. And I think we also have to be honest of the world we're in. I think someone in the chat said, wouldn't it be great if the world was perfect and we didn't have to have this conversation? But I don't know that that's the reality. And I want that reality for my son. But in order to get there, we need to have these uncomfortable conversations. Mm-hmm. Understanding the experience of that I had as a Black woman on assignment in India, and knowing people are not used to seeing people like me in charge, or they're very curious about where I'm from. I've been on holidays in Vietnam where people are touching me because they're not sure, they've never seen someone like me, or touching my hair. And you hear these stories in the media, and I've had people say, that's not really true, is it? And I'm like, oh, but yes, it is. So I think acknowledging that our experiences are real, and then that piece that you all have talked about educating and not just educating the person going on assignment to be ready to be on display potentially all the time, because that can be confronting and tiring, but also educating the countries that they're going to. So making sure that that team that they are going to is, aware of who that person is and ready to accept them for who they are and let them be their authentic self and lead. I think that's really important. So, I let someone else get on with it, but I just wanted to say thank you for having this conversation.
I wanted to bring Kristin into the conversation, because that actually raises something. You were talking about your experience in India, your experience in other locations. And I know when we were chatting earlier, Kristin, you were talking about the fact that sometimes when you get intercultural training from certain organizations, we won't name names here, then they're pretty bland. They just talk about the culture of the country you're going to, whereas actually good intercultural training should, as far as possible, be personalized to your experience. So what will it be like going to a location, not for a standard person that they've got in their mind, but for individualized, so it can be personalized. And I mean, I know that's something that you feel quite strongly about. So we haven't got long left, but could you tell us a bit about your thinking on that, Kristin?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and yeah, like you mentioned, I'm not going to name names, but I had an experience in the past where one of my drivers was to ensure that we saw a change in the international or in the intercultural training program that was being utilized. And we made that change, and we're able to do that by leveraging a company that did exactly what you just described. And what I had explained in our previous discussions is that they essentially did a true assessment of the individual, their family, all of the details of their background, and truly outlined a personalized training for them that was unique to the differences that they knew were going to exist when they were entering this new location, and really outlining, what to expect and what to anticipate. And I think a part of that and a portion of that was even done and is being done through, an intake session before the individual is even sent on assignment to see, okay, is this going to be a good fit? But then once that individual is selected, truly getting into the nitty gritty thing of everything, and being able to outline what to expect and how to navigate that, and aligning them with other individuals that maybe experienced some of the things that they will probably experience in this new location. And I think it's really important. I don't think enough of the intercultural training programs do that. And so I challenge them to maybe take a look at that and see what kind of change can be instituted to make it more of a personalized nature.
Okay, I'm sure if anybody wants to reach out to you, Kristin, privately, you can tell them who you found good in this area and who hasn't been so good. We won't name names. Obviously, from my point of view, with Benevo, we do personalized. Everything we do is personalized. But anyway, advert over. But we are sort of running out of time now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Pat and Julia back into the picture. So Pat and Julia, I know you've been waiting in the green room whilst this conversation's been going on, but it's such an important conversation that we've been having.
Very fascinating to listen to.
Yeah.
Okay, and all that really remains, I noticed, by the way, when we were talking about personalised intercultural training, there were some light bulbs going up on the LinkedIn screen. So clearly, that was resonating with everybody. But sadly, we are now out of time. It has been a fantastic show. Thank you so much to everybody, to Sheryll, to Michelle, to Ursula, to Kristin, to Pat, to Julia. Actually, especially Ursula, what time is it now for you?
2.
It's 2 a.m. Oh my God, it's 2 a.m.
Oh, sorry.
in the morning.
It's 2:10 in the morning.
Oh, bless you.
And no doubt you'll be picked up by a child at some point in just a few hours' time. We better let you go to bed. You've been a star, but you've all been absolute rock stars. It's an amazing show. The hearts and the applauses and everything is going just wild up the screen. We're now off for August. Everybody have a great summer, and well, it might as well rain until September. As they say, we're off for August, and we'll see you everybody again on the 1st of September. Take care, everybody, and many thanks to our wonderful, wonderful panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.